Hi, I'm Corey Moss. I am here with Simon Dudley, the video evangelist from Life Size. How are you, Simon?
I'm great. Good to see you, Corey.
Good to see you. In introduction, I am going to talk about Simon. In 2012, Life Size announced its newest position within the company, appointing Simon Dudley as video evangelist. A new title at Life Size and a first of its kind within the industry, Simon was tasked with promoting how video communication can help drive social collaboration while accelerating business success. A video advocate, Simon has worked at Lifesize for 11 years and has more than 20 years of experience in the video communication industry. Adding to his impressive video background, Simon holds 3 patents, including a battery operated speakerphone and charging stand and multi component video conferencing system. Very interestingly, Simon has stated, according to his LinkedIn profile, that he has been in plane crashes, skydived, gotten a fist fight in Mongolia, and a ton of other, as he said, mad stuff, as well as exceeding 200 miles per hour on a motorcycle. So I did want to detail that for Simon because I know Simon does a few things outside the box, and I thought that was very interesting. But lastly, I just wanted to say that Simon, as a non-traditionalist thinker, uh, works either alone or as part of a team and continues to create amazing things. So, Simon, thank you very much for being a part of this interview. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Corey.
And I'd like to start by asking you to please tell me about current solutions and strategies, life size.
Well, we're in an interesting time. Video conferencing has, for the last 20 years, since I last got involved, started getting involved in it, it's basically been a technology that everyone's been waiting for everyone else to go and buy it. There has been a sense of last mover advantage because customers look at video conferencing and they go, right, well, we like the idea of it, but audio conferencing is free. Web conferencing is $39 a month. Video conferencing is $200,000 to get in the game. And lots of companies have sat there and gone quite reasonably, well, that's great, and we think it's useful, but I can't prove that it's useful. And for that kind of money, I think I'd rather go and buy a new data center.
Mm-hmm.
The other problem with it was that if you bought it and you were the first person in your business world to buy it, then you were at a disadvantage because everyone else could then come along later. They had an advantage on buying it because you already had it, and they'd probably get a better solution at a lower price. So it's a bit like a swimming pool where everyone sat there on the edge waiting for everyone else to get in.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did last year was we changed the way the world works. If you've already noticed, and I'm sure you have, Corey, I've read tons of your stuff, you already know this,
Thank
the
you.
world is moving to software as a service, or IaaS these days, infrastructure as a service. So we've disrupted the market and done that very heavily for video conferencing. So instead of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get in the game, you simply buy it as a service now, and it's very inexpensive. It allows users to then get involved in video communications, and they don't have to use it just inside their own organization because it sits outside of their own environment. It means that they can get all the people in their supply chain involved. So now there's a first mover advantage in video conferencing, not a last mover. And we've just launched a couple of new products in the last couple of weeks, Icon Flex and Icon 400, that have reduced the cost of the endpoints. I mean, we have video conferencing, high definition video conferencing endpoints today for under $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
You couple that with a service that allows you to do what would have cost you, and I'm literally stating this is literally true rather than figuratively true, literally true, hundreds of thousands of dollars traditionally. Instead of that, it's $10,000 or so to buy some infrastructure, will make all that stuff work, and you can get all your supply chain involved. So now we're in a first mover advantage scenario. It's actually I've been in this market for 20 years, and we've slowly got better. And what we've done now is gone through what I would argue is an accession event. What success looks like for this market has changed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's being extremely well received. We're very excited about it.
Good. I got to tell you, first of all, Simon, that is a high compliment from you about reading my blogs. And I have to say that in the collaboration space, I've actually been a good part of that now for at least the past year and a half.
Yeah.
Getting to know people in high places, meeting with them at Infocom, talking to them like this, interviewing them. It's such an important market now, and it's such a growing market at this point. And evangelizing, I have to say, being able to evangelize, and I've actually been considered that in certain respects as well. Um, I think more and more companies are relying on people such as yourself to go ahead and spread the word for them, for the industry. And I have to say, on the whole, I think the industry, in terms of video conferencing collaboration, probably looks at you as more as a even a trendsetter in certain respects. So being that for life size is one thing, but I think being that for the industry and all, the discussion and the panels you're on, I think they see that as highly strategic.
Well, that's nice of you to say so. I mean, patently, I do work for Life Size. Life Size pays me. I'm a professional. I get paid to say nice things about my company. But equally, I do try and be above the fray. I'm not, I'm not on a target. I don't sell things to customers, or at least not directly. So we try and be. I'm much more interested in pushing the whole video needle forward. If they buy our product, that would be great, and I think we've got a great product, which Paintly I was heavily involved in designing. So I am going to be biased. But as a general principle, the market is so enormous. There's the opportunity so big, and the way that we could improve people's lives so great that really, whoever's solution it is, I'm just pleased that people are using video.
Right, right. And you know what? That's an important statement too, Simon. And I tell you what, let's move on to the next. As I'm stating here, as a video evangelist that you are, can you give your opinion on hardware-based on-premise versus cloud computing solutions in the video conferencing market?
Well, it's interesting, right? So Lifesize straddles that line. We're the only manufacturer who does both.
Mm-hmm.
So there are the traditional players, the Cisco's and Polycoms, and they do great products, and I'm not going to belittle them. And they do big hardware infrastructure devices. And then there are other players like Zoom and Blue Jeans and others who are software in the sky type solutions. Often they're things like Blue Jeans specifically is very much think of it as a MCU in the sky. So it's a meeting point. There's certainly a market for that application.
Right.
But what we've done is, and we're in a position to do this because we make hardware as well as do services, we've married the two together. You see, the problem, the traditional on-prem guys, it's the $200,000 to get in the game problem. And the cloud guys don't have an integrated solution. Think of it like iPods, right? The iPod didn't win because it was the best MP3 player. It won because iTunes and the iPod together produce an ecosystem that was basically unbeatable.
Right.
But and that's what we're trying to do in the video space, where we don't think that users need to be experts in video conferencing to use it anymore. In fact, my experience is the more you need to know about the technology to make it work, the worse it is. It's the old Leonardo da Vinci, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. If I make a point-to-point call to you, for example, I dial you by IP address or by URL.
Right.
But if we do a three-way call with somebody else, then we all have to dial into a bridge.
Right.
Well, you need to know what a bridge is for that to happen. Mm-hmm. And then we need to know how many participants we can put in the bridge. Well, no one wants to know that. Mm-hmm. What they want to do is either ring you or ring me or ring either of us and just start having people join the meeting. And you can do that with a good cloud solution, which you can't do with an on-prem solution. And the bridge in the sky type things, the Ready Talk equivalents for video conferencing don't allow that either, because you wouldn't want to do your point-to-point calls if you can help it in one of those devices, because it adds latency, it adds costs, and you're ending up doing a point-to-point call through a bridge, which seems such a waste of energy when you could do it directly.
Right, right. And that was a very interesting analogy you made with the Apple products, the iPod and such. And it seems that Life Size has stepped out of the box or outside the box with hardware cloud. And I do know of the solutions. I've written about them. I've talked to people and interviewed. I did interview Craig Malloy for my Disruptive Forces series. Craig made some great comments and viewpoints to that. And really, the strategy that he pointed out, he did point out the cloud strategy as being a very, very big deal for Life Size now. And it almost seems that Life Size is really paying a great focus to the cloud strategy at this point. To go along, and again, your new hardware solutions in combination now seem to be, again, a very good strategy for the company.
Yeah, well, you need to have. Craig said, and in fact, I think Steve Jobs said initially that the best software companies make their own hardware
Mm-hmm.
because you need to have that tight integration between the service and the endpoint. And if you think about Creative Labs, it's a perfect example. In the MP3 world, I remember having one of their MP3 players. Must have been 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It was a little round pebble thing, and you could put an SD card or something in it. I forget now. And it worked all right. You could drag files onto it from your PC, and it worked all right. It was pretty decent, and it was a lot cheaper than the iTunes,
Right,
Apple,
right.
iPhone or iPad,
The iPod.
iPod. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
too many eyes. Device. But it's not what users wanted. They wanted an integrated solution, and we really think that's what the market's after.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. Absolutely. All right, let's move on. You wrote an article that appeared just recently, which details how millennials will be driving tech trends in 2015, which I've actually spoken on too and written on. How millennials are driving, especially the tech market, and will continue to drive the tech market. In it, you categorize three things: unified communications, video, and the cloud, computing everywhere, IT as a service, and low cost computing in the enterprise. So, why don't we start from where we talk about UC video in the cloud and go through those categories, topics, and discuss that?
Sure. I mean, the first thing to say is the thing with millennials is they don't even conceptually understand the idea that the IT department's in charge.
Hmm.
The IT, they have always bought whatever IT they wanted, whatever technology they want. They just simply went and got it. And the idea of coming to the office and being told, no, you can't have that, and that we don't know how to do these things is an anathema. They'll do it anyway.
Hmm.
They're a little bit like CEOs. I remember when the iPhone first came out, our CEO, Craig Malloy, a note came out from our IT director saying there will be no iPhones on the corporate network because we don't know what the security ramifications are.
Hmm.
And Craig and I were chatting one morning, and he said to me, "Oh, this should be fun." And he pulled out an iPhone and said, "I'm going to tell our IT director I want this put on the network by lunchtime." And in the old days, the CEO was the only guy who could ever do that. And now the millennials turn up to work and just, well, of course you'll make all these things happen. And I think that that's fundamentally changed the way of work. Old people like me, we still have some level of deference for what the IT department's applications or requirements are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't have much, but I have more than your average millennial who is simply saying, no, I use video conferencing in every part of my personal life, and now you expect me to use a desk phone?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what are you talking about? It's no. And they'll just go and do it for themselves without even thinking of the ramifications. And I think that fundamentally changes IT. And so as a result, IT have got a problem because IT traditionally used to look after hardware. There was a rack full of boxes with blinky lights on them and a whole bunch of cables around the office and a whole bunch of PCs they owned and a whole bunch of pieces of software on those computers. And they owned all of that. And that was fine. But in the modern era, they don't need to own and probably shouldn't own any of that stuff. What they should be effectively is service providers
Mm-hmm.
to their customers.
Mm-hmm.
A perfect example of this was I met a client a few years ago in a slightly different context. He worked for a very large international bank. And he pointed out to me he had about 24 engineers who would look after the telephony system for this bank. They had about 40,000 people, and he had about 6 video conferencing engineers scattered around the globe looking after their 500 video conferencing rooms. And I said to him, well, that's all well and good. He said, no, it's awful. I don't want to do any of those things. He said, we're a bank. We know about money. I don't want to be a service provider, but I don't have any choice because I can't buy those things as services. I said, well, what can you buy as a service? He said, cellular stuff. He said, I've got 37,000 Blackberries. And you know how much infrastructure I have for my cellular network globally? Nothing. Nothing at all. He said, I have these 3 people and I spend £3 million a month with Vodafone. And that's where they wanted to go. And I think that the millennials are just going to push that agenda ever further.
Right. And I agree with you. What's interesting, Simon, as you talk about that, I'm far from a millennial, obviously, but I've got to tell you, over the last year and a half, I have done more video conferencing, and I do it every week. I have numerous video conferences every week now than I ever have before. And I was in AV integration sales for over 15 years. And, you know, we did the classical equipment systems. Then there really was no cloud to speak of. And nowadays, I do a lot over cloud video conferencing. In fact, we talked about our online media show, and that is over cloud video conferencing. And I've got to tell you, it's just so progressive these days, Simon, what you can do with the technology. And you're right. I think the millennials are driving and going to drive this hard into, you know, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. So I think it's great perspective that you bring on that.
Well, I mean, I got a 12 and a 13-year-old, and those boys have iPhones. Surprise, surprise, they have iPhones.
Right.
I doubt they've made a phone call in the last month. I mean,
True.
One of them uses iFunny on a 20-hour-a-day basis.
Okay.
And the other one texts. I mean, they text everyone all the time.
Huh.
You pick up, they've got the most horrible phone manners in the world. I mean, I guess all 13-year-olds do, but I mean, it's like, oh, hello, boy, you there? Yeah. And it's like, come on. But they'll do a video call with me.
Right.
And the whole idea that technology is not available is surprising. The other thing that's changed in the corporate space is, and we've noticed this a lot recently, is the growth of the huddle room. Right? People are moving away from, in your AV days, you would remember this, video conferencing was put in the boardroom,
right,
and then 5% of the time it's being used for a video call, and 50% of the time it's being used for other meetings, and the other 45% of the time it's not doing anything for anyone.
Right.
And so what companies have realized is actually, and this is where the Icon 400 and Icon Flex fit perfectly, is these huddle rooms is where all the actual work gets done. You know, the bigger the meeting, the more likely it is to be talking about work. And the smaller the meeting, the more likely there's actually going to be work going on. And we found that in these open plan offices, which seem to be all the rage today,
yes, yeah.
I won't go into my personal opinion. They are all the rage, and I'll leave it at that. They're very popular. But the 10 by 10 room in the corners, and there's normally a fleet of these things, and they've got a glass wall and 3 or 4 or 5 people sitting there and do work together. That's where all the work's getting done. And in fact, we're finding explosive growth in that environment for video conferencing. But you couldn't put a $15,000 solution into a room of that size. Not only would it not fit, but it would cost too much, couldn't scale it. But when you're talking about $2,500 or so for a full high definition video conferencing solution, it makes perfect sense to equip all the rooms with it. And that's fundamental change in the way people work.
Oh yeah, and you talk about the open space offices. Absolutely, I actually have some things to say about that, but I'll keep that to myself. But the huddle rooms at this point are just busting out everywhere you go, and it's interesting. You talk about your Icon solution. You talk about other companies that are creating such solutions at low price and all. That seems to be a big way to go. But then again, you also have your high price systems. You have your your really expensive telepresence solutions. So it just seems like the market is still pretty widespread to all of that.
It is. You know what? I like the concept of telepresence,
Mm-hmm.
but the problem with all these things is it's ultimately down to Metcalfe's law. Metcalfe said in 1973, Dr. Metcalfe, should I say, 1973, that the utility of a network or the power of a network goes up at the square of the number of nodes in it. In other words, the bigger the network, the more useful it is because you've got more people to ring.
Right.
And by the way, for those of you who aren't aware, Dr. Metcalfe invented Ethernet, founded 3Com, is a billionaire. He's a regular visitor in our office, and he's also a professor at UT. So, he's got some kudos in this environment.
Uh-huh.
And the problem with the telepresence rooms is if you have, let's say you're a big financial institution, and they are one of the biggest users of telepresence, and you've got a London office, City of London office, and a Wall Street office, telepresence is perfect application for you.
Mm-hmm.
You've got very important, very senior people, and a small group in London, a small group in New York, and they need to talk now because the Swiss franc's just taken a bath, as an example, is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
But to talk for a mid-sized company or even a bigger company that wants to talk to its supply chain, then telepresence is a disaster because you spend all this money on this infrastructure and this technology to buy it. And then if no one else has, you're back to that last mover advantage problem. So much better in our experience to equip those smaller rooms with still a look through a window quality experience. And that's what video conferencing needs to be successful. But at a price at which means you can equip all the meeting rooms, which means that when you walk into a meeting room, you've got plenty of people to ring, which you most definitely don't with the telepresence. And it's interesting to see that telepresence, although still a market of a few $100 million a year, is actually declining pretty precipitously in the market today.
Yes.
No, I haven't seen anyone launch any new products in that space,
Right.
With the exception of Cisco for the last year. And to be fair to Cisco, Cisco is a fine company. How could I? They got $1 billion in the bank or something. I'm not going to belittle Cisco. They're a fine company,
Right.
but they've done it for different reasons.
Yeah.
They put telepresence in because it means that John Chambers, their CEO, can meet the board of any of the Global 500 that he wants to anytime. Well, $500,000 to do that. It's a marketing exercise. Ignore whether he makes any money selling telepresence. It's in his interest to be able to get in the faces of these very important people. And for a company like him, that's worth a fortune.
And not to get too far into Cisco, but I remember not too long ago seeing a video with John Chambers and Roland Trollope showing off their new lower cost solutions, and I looked at them and said, wow, this is very, very good stuff that they're doing. And even they're buying into the fact that you have to start driving these lower cost budget type solutions into the enterprise, even as well as SMB, because that's the way the market is going now.
Well, let's keep it in perspective. Cisco, they got some fine products, by the way. I think the M700, the M800, they're $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 each. They're fine products. And they're great at the global 100 market, but they don't scale down. And Cisco's using these things to sell a lot more routers and switches, which is their real bread and butter.
Right.
Chambers said about 5 years ago, for each dollar spent on video conferencing, Cisco gets $5 worth of infrastructure sales. And and that's fine for them, good for them. But we feel the majority of the market, the big fat middle market space out there, doesn't want to own it. Right. Increasingly wants to run it as a service and wants to use it to talk to lots and lots of people.
Okay, so getting back to what we're talking about, in part of your article, you focused on maturation of infrastructure as a service technology, IaaS, in leading to better software as a service, SaaS applications, as well as how cloud offerings are redefining how we think about team collaboration and document sharing, which is another good point. Can you expand on those viewpoints in the article?
Well, I mean, in simple terms, all of those things are important, right? Document sharing is as important, well, perhaps not as important as seeing faces, but certainly the $5 billion a year document sharing WebEx or Citrix GoToMeeting or web conferencing market proves that there is a huge market for people wanting to share data.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that that's a space that everyone needs to move into. You look at every single one of the UC players, all the Cisco's and the ShoreTels and the MyTels and Link or Skype for Business as it is now. All of those products either started as telephony, moved into data, and are now moving into video, or started like Microsoft did. You could argue started in data, then moved in telephony, and now are beginning to work into video. So products like ours, for example, need to be able to integrate, and we do, by the way, with some of our products, integrate very nicely into Link or Skype for Business.
Right.
Not my favorite turn of phrase, but what is their decision? Who am I to second guess them?
Right.
Uh, I think it proves that people need all of it. As far as the maturation of this market is concerned, I mean, SaaS as a concept has probably existed longer than SaaS as a turn of phrase has existed.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at things like, and if you've ever read the book behind the curtain or behind the cloud, I'm sorry, behind the cloud, the talk about Salesforce.com and how it just crushed the Siebel world.
Right.
That's happened in numerous markets. It's interesting to see how the telephony players are moving away from getting customers to buy a switch or increasingly a VM slice in their own environment and running it for them. It makes a lot of sense for the suppliers and for the customers.
Mm-hmm.
So, frankly, in some senses, it is a story because it's important in video conferencing, but we're actually a laggard as a technology. You know, you look at how successful VMware's been
Right.
in the last 10 years
Right.
and how I think it was 2007 or something that more material or more money was spent on SaaS technology than was spent on on-prem technology as general data stuff.
Right.
So increasingly, it's going to happen in video conferencing because it's happened in everything else. We're kind of the last guys standing, really.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? Talking about VM and all, on-prem software-defined networks, it's really starting to seep into the enterprise, especially. And I go to government conferences, and even there, they're talking about SDN and working with VMware. It looks like that is starting to really get into the industry. I think people are still trying to grasp it. They are grasping the cloud computing. And you talk about storage, document sharing, a lot of that is going on in the cloud. Um, and you talk about private, public, hybrid, which hybrid is becoming a very big deal at this point. Um, Kind of talk about, I guess, a little more expand upon, where you believe cloud is going in those respects.
Well, let's talk about us specifically to start with. So today, our on-prem solutions, if you buy an on-prem solution from Lifesize, you can buy it as a Hyper-V or VMware instance
Right.
or environment to run on your own Hyper-V or VMware slice, or you can buy it as a box. And it's a pizza box that slides into your rack, and it happens to be running VMware on it, but you wouldn't know
Right.
unless we bother telling you, and we generally do. And then you can run it, or you run it as a cloud service from us, and we work on the IBM cloud. And surprise, surprise, it's based on virtualized machines because we can spin up a new server in 5 minutes flat. You know, without things like VMware and these data centers, we couldn't do this. So we sit there and say to customers, we got both. You pick whichever one you want.
Mm-hmm.
Hybrid is not there yet in
Right.
video conferencing, either from us or anyone else.
Right.
And I will say that the traditional hardware suppliers of infrastructure other than us, are not using VMware or Hyper-V for their solutions. So they're still in dedicated hardware solutions, which that's okay. I mean, the quality can be excellent, as good as VMware, but the scalability is a problem because you can't just simply rev up the amount you need, or you can't disperse it around the world because it comes in a box. And so that's a bit of a disadvantage for them. I'm sure they'll get there eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But we sit there with clients and say, if for whatever reason you can't run a cloud solution, then you can have an on-prem one. But I will say, and it's kind of interesting, it's interesting to see how business is moving.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of the growth is in the cloud solution because it's really what customers have always wanted. They don't want to be their own service provider.
Right. And I'll say also, where you talk about VMware Hyper-V, Hyper-V is Microsoft hypervisor, and of course VMware. Very well known. And I guess, VMware versus Hyper-V, VMware dominates the market. Most run off of VMware. But again, if you can do VMware Hyper-V, I think integrators who are really bringing that out to the market should get to know both, where clients might be running on Hyper-V and all, and really be able to bring that too. So those are very good points, Simon. Definitely.
And Corey, I would point out from our point of perspective, I could care less which one you run. It doesn't matter to me whether you run Hyper-V or VMware. It's purely a delivery mechanism. It's like saying, would you rather FedEx or UPS deliver the box?
Right.
Well, I can care less. It's irrelevant.
Right. And if they bring that to life size, then you're ready to act on, again, whatever hypervisor that enterprise company is using or government organization. And I think being able to do that makes you very nimble in that respect to bring either or, and then you bring your cloud solution. And I think at this point it's very well defined at life size, where again you can bring the icon, you can bring your other hardware solutions, integrate the cloud. I tell you what, it seems like life size at this point has become extraordinarily well rounded. And compared to the long-time companies in the industry, it looks like life size has really catapulted into the modern day, let's say.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, thank you. It's good of you to say so. Of course, I will agree with you. But because it's interesting to see what else it gives you, right? Because you license it on a yearly basis, our application, you can name all your users. You can even name guests who don't have to own licenses. You simply go to our website and download the apps for your iPhone, iPad, whatever else, PC, Mac, whatever else you've got.
Right.
You get on with using it. You don't even need to, in fact, as a guest, like for example, I had Lifesize Cloud. Let's say we'd made this call over Lifesize today. We didn't, but it doesn't matter. I could have sent you a link. And on that link, you could have done one of two things. You could have downloaded the app to your computer, PC. I don't know if you're a PC or Mac user, it wouldn't have mattered either.
Right.
Or your iPad, or your iPhone, or your Android device. But if you hadn't had any of those, I can give you a WebRTC link. And I think I'd like to talk about WebRTC in some detail here.
Yeah.
WebRTC is going to change the world, because what WebRTC is think of it as video conferencing built into a browser.
Right.
Now, it's only in certain browsers today. It's specifically in Chrome, most effectively in Chrome, but it also works in Firefox, and there's plugins now for Microsoft Internet Explorer, for those of you who still use it.
Yeah, don't go there.
It's fine. It's a fine product by a great organization.
Right.
If you want to use Explorer, that's fine. Yeah. But you can have the plugin, and that means that you don't need to download anything. We could have initiated this call by me simply clicking on the link, and the call would have been made. In fact, I bought myself a $300 Chromebook the other day. It's a magnificent little laptop.
It is. I have one too, by the way, Simon. It is
an
magnificent.
Amazing device. I mean, I'm a Mac bigger of the first order. Right? Most people would say you will buy anything with Apple written on it, and appears to have been the truth the last 10 years. But I bought this Chromebook maybe a month ago, and I am really sold on its capabilities. And Casey King, our CTO, and by the way, ex-Apple fellow, and I did a call on it the other day, and he was on his laptop, his MacBook Pro, $1,500 worth of MacBook Pro, and I'm on a pretty high-end Chromebook, but it was a $270 Chromebook, so let's keep it in perspective. And I did a perfectly good quality video conference call through Chrome browser on this thing.
Right.
And we just sat there going, this is 207. It's cheaper than an iPad.
I know. Isn't that amazing?
It was. And you think about what ramifications that has for two major constituencies. The first one is corporate environments where you can't load new apps. But most big corporates are not in the big, we talked earlier about millennials, right? You try going to Morgan Stanley or Barclays or in some big bank and saying, oh, I'd just like to download an app on my laptop. It's like, no, you cannot do it. It won't allow you. The system is lock solid. But Chrome and WebRTC would allow those people to get involved in video conference calls because they've had to download nothing. And then the second one is the education market. I mean, Google are selling more Chromebooks than you shake a stick at into the education market.
Yes.
They're the perfect education product.
Yes.
My boy's got a MacBook Air, And every time he gets it in or out of his rucksack, I shudder looking at this beautiful MacBook Air, thinking, how many more days will that survive?
Right, and how costly it is too.
Yeah, so I mean, if he had a Chromebook, which he may well be getting soon, maybe my existing one, let's hope he doesn't watch this. He'll know. Then I don't care. I do care if he smashes it every 3 months, but it's not that important. All
Right.
the data's backed up, and so that constituency to get involved in video is huge
Yeah.
and
And
very exciting.
yeah, and I'll tell you, backing it into Google Drive, which it does, working with Gmail and all the Google applications. I'm going to tell you a very funny story that happened the other day. So I was followed on Twitter by the inventor of Chrome OS and the Chromebook, and I just connected to him on LinkedIn, and I thought that was very interesting. And I will try and get to know him, but I thought that was a very interesting incident where this gentleman has basically invented Chrome OS, or did invent Chrome OS in the Chromebook. So, but my experience with the Chromebook has been very good, and I do have to do video conferences through WebRTC, through Chrome, so, and Firefox, which I'm looking at too. So those are going to be interesting experiences without a doubt.
Well, and it leads into the point that this is the whole a Chromebook 5 years ago couldn't have existed. Ignoring the technical ramifications, it was because you ran applications on your computer.
Right.
Where now almost everything I do runs on a web browser.
Hmm.
I mean, as I said before, I'm a Mac bigot, so I use Apple iWork. So I've got Pages and Numbers and Keynote, and I write all my presentations in Keynote.
Right.
Of course, I can open a web browser now and run Keynote in a web browser.
Mm.
So I do that on my Chromebook, not on my MacBook Pro. And it's like, so everything's becoming a service.
Yep.
To the point where all the laptop is a window to the one computer.
Hmm.
It's funny, IBM said in the 50s that they could see a potential market for as many as 6 computers in the future. And they were wrong. And everyone laughs at them. And they were wrong. Really, there's one computer now. You and I know it as the internet.
Right.
And everything we use is simply a window to it. I mean, if I turned off the wireless connector on your laptop, what have you got? You got a terrible typewriter. You could type a letter, but you couldn't even give me a copy unless you gave me the whole laptop. A mechanical typewriter would be a better solution.
Mm.
So it's fascinating that's why things like cloud fit into that world so nicely, because we're all just on the internet all the time.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny that my friends in the industry joke about me. They say, what do you do with that Wi-Fi? And all of that. I say, listen, as long as I got Wi-Fi in Starbucks, I'm good. That's my world now. So, but I got to tell you, Simon, and I have a cabled connection at home, high speed, always working on hi-fi. If I go to an event or conference in Washington, D.C., I'm at a hotel, a conference center. If I stop in a Starbucks, I am always working, and I'm always on the internet. So you're right. That's a very big deal at this point.
It's an interesting world.
Oh, it is. It definitely is. So you'd mentioned security before,
Yeah.
and it's a major discussion point these days. And I write a lot on cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a big part of my world at this point. So when considering applications in video conferencing, including discussion of the browser-based WebRTC, which there have also been great discussions to security, why don't you talk about that?
It's a good question. Video conferencing security is a fascinating topic, and it depends on what you define as security. 10 years ago, there were a lot of concerns that security of video conferencing meant people attacking your video conferencing endpoint over IP and forcing it to dial the ISDN lines in the back of the video conferencing system to premium rate Russian numbers and making about $1 million a month out of your endpoints when you weren't looking. So that's one level of security. Luckily, ISDN's all gone away, so that doesn't exist anymore. But that's one level of security. Another level of security would be using video conferencing to get into someone else's network and do damage in whatever form damage would take, to take over these devices. Now, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I do keep a pretty close eye on this stuff. It is a topic that interests me greatly, and I've never heard even remotely of any circumstance in which that's happened.
Mm.
So I don't believe that that anyone has, or there is any ability to you to purloin a video conferencing solution to attack someone else's data. I can't use this call to look at data on your laptop or vice versa. There's never been a case of that. I don't see any reason why that would change in the future. So the third part of this is the security of who is listening into my calls.
Right.
Now, the first thing to be aware of course, is security is one of those funny things. People are nervous about the security of new things, but not nervous of security of things they've had forever. So the first point to make is, how secure is most people's telephony? Because nobody encrypts their telephony, and no one seems to be worried about their telephony being broken into. Now, video conferencing, you say, oh, well, video conferencing is more important, although I somehow doubt that it is more important than telephony.
Right.
So the first thing to say is, we and every other major manufacturer, every major manufacturer I know of in video conferencing encrypts their video conferencing.
Right.
And we encrypt it at 128-bit AES, which is basically the same level of security that the banking system for your Visa card or MasterCard works at.
Right.
My first guess would be that GCHQ and the NSA have probably broken it. I can't tell you if they really have or not, but it wouldn't be surprising to me if they had, or they got a back door. But I don't know, it may not be true, I don't know. There's probably, if they've done that, they can probably get into every other solution. What I think that isn't true, and I'm certain of it because of other ramifications it would have, is I don't think anyone in the evil part of the internet world, the criminal part of the world or industrial espionage world, has broken that. Because if they had, and you can break AES 128-bit, then you're not going to go for the Corey and Simon video conference call.
Right.
You're going to go for the Visa network.
Correct.
You're going to go and you're going to rip off the banks and make a lot more money than listening to you and me talking. So the first answer is, all video conferencing is basically encrypted these days, or can be. Not everyone switches it on, but it's certainly switched on as default by most systems. The next thing to be aware of is when people say, oh, but that's not true for a cloud solution. You know, with cloud, you must know what the call's about, because you've got to be able to do the trunking. You know, you've got to be able to connect people together. And there is that to an extent. As a service provider, this would be true for all service providers, we would know who is dialing who, because we have to connect the calls, right? There's no, you can't encrypt that, or else how could we manipulate it? We can't. But just because the signaling is not encrypted doesn't mean that the call isn't. So we would know that Corey wants to speak to Simon in a video conference call and they want to do it at 1:30. Right. But we couldn't, and neither could any other manufacturer or supplier, actually interrupt or get involved in the call. It's all encrypted. We don't know what the conversation's about. One of the reasons that people are nervous, certain organizations, I did a talk in DC a couple of weeks ago and talked about cloud, and a gentleman there said, I'm not certain it would fulfill our security applications. I said, well, kind of depends who you're from, where you're from. He said, I work out of a 3-letter acronym based in the Pentagon. And I went, no, cloud is not for you. Because for folks at that level, who's speaking to who is important.
Oh, yeah.
So they would be more interested in an on-prem solution. And plainly, they're never going to use a cloud solution from anyone for anything.
Yeah, and the federal government is, of course, mostly on-prem. They are looking at some cloud-based solutions, and I've talked to people out of the federal government, including a CTO. And you're right, they are mostly on-prem. They're very wary, but they do have a lot of things that they base cloud solutions on, including SLA. And again, I go to these conferences and I hear about all of that. But touching on WebRTC, and of course it's browser-based, I was looking to partner with a company that actually does web browser-based cybersecurity. And I asked them about WebRTC. They said, well, we're not up to that point, but it is something we will definitely look into. So there's been a lot of talk about WebRTC and security to it, of course, because it is browser-based.
Yes, but it's still, the calls are still encrypted. The signaling would be the same. Really, all that a WebRTC client is the algorithms, whether it's VP8 or H.264 or
Hmm.
G722 or AAC or whatever the video and audio algorithms are, and whether it's a SIP or an H3, they normally SIP transport mechanism are, they are just simply contained within the wrapper of the video, of the browser. I see no reason to imagine they'd be any less secure than an application.
Hmm.
So
Again,
I
yeah,
don't think that's. It's one of those I can't prove a negative,
right.
um, but equally I don't see it on the surface. It seems no reason to imagine it would be any less secure than any other environment. And keep it in perspective. Most companies seem extremely happy giving Salesforce all of their data about every one of their customers, but
Right.
never encrypting a single one of their audio conferences, and or never checking their windows for lasers or checking their offices for bugs. So,
Mhm.
I suspect that given government level encryption experts and enough compute power, you might be able to break some of these things. But in the real world of actual proper customers, that normal organizations rather than extraordinary ones,
Mhm.
I think that we're so far down the threat level of attack prospects that
Yeah.
it's not realistically very sensible to consider it.
I know of companies in the industry that do work on selling into the federal government. They do have their challenges. And of course, there are challenges to selling into the federal government anyway. But, again, I'll tell you a very interesting thing about Salesforce. It took a long and painful process for them to be approved. So I saw that and I said, well, if a Salesforce goes through that, it's very, very interesting. You have Amazon Web Services that are fully approved and running in the federal government. So, and they have their web federal services. So more and more, you're seeing this going into that space too,
Yeah.
which is very big. So,
And I would say that our sweet spot is in the mid-market organizations.
right,
I mean, we have plenty of global 500s, but our sweet spot is the 5,000 to 100 person type companies. And
right.
I think I would be very comfortable in saying it's highly secure. It's much more secure than many other applications they're already using in their environment.
Hmm.
So if they wanted to be secure in their communications, they should stop using a phone and start using life-size cloud,
Right.
because that would be a completely reasonable argument.
Good point. This has been terrific, Simon. There's one more thing I want to ask you if you have anything more to say directed towards the integrators, to the consultants, about your products, about solutions, about, what we've discussed on the whole.
Sure. I think the part I would make is traditionally video conferencing is one of those topics that you had to have a degree in it to buy it and a master's degree in it to sell it,
Hmm.
and perhaps the other way around, because it's always easier to buy. It's easier to sell something than it is to buy it.
Right.
And I think a lot of people have shied away from video conferencing because not only was it complicated to buy, and it was it was very different to everything else they'd ever invested in from a technological point of view. Well, that's changed. And now it's a service. You don't have to worry about how it all operates behind the scenes. It's all, we can explain it to you if you want to know. And there's no
Right.
black magic here, but equally, it doesn't matter anymore. It does. Do Corey and I want to have a conversation over video call? Yes, right. I'll dial him and we will communicate. And I don't need a video conferencing manager anymore. And I don't need to worry so much about $100,000 room build for the boardroom, although those still exist.
Hmm.
I want to be looking now at enabling lots of users. I want to look at enabling huddle rooms with very inexpensive endpoint solutions that have to be great quality, and they are.
Hmm.
And then I need to look mostly at what business problem are we looking to solve? You see, I talked about this recently. People ask me about video conferencing. And the first question I ask, when they ask me all sorts of questions, I said, no. What's the problem? What's your single biggest business problem?
Right.
Because video conferencing could probably help you with that.
Right.
And I think if the consultants out there are going to get involved, they should move less and less about the bits and bytes about how it works and talk much more about what the service is and the business solution to a problem, which is almost always time related.
Hmm.
Video conferencing is about getting things done today rather than in 2 days or 5 days or 3 weeks. And the chances are that you and I, if we didn't do this over video today, you and I would probably next get together. I'm guessing you're going to Enterprise Connect.
It's possible. I have not
Okay.
decided yet.
But if it's not Enterprise, so that would be at the end of what's that, mid-March. So
Yeah.
this meeting wouldn't happen until mid-March. But if you didn't go to Enterprise Connect, would I see you at IT Expo, or would I see you at Infocom?
Well, you'll
Or,
definitely see me at Infocom. The others are very good considerations right now.
so this is perfect example, right? So if we had to wait until we physically met to have this conversation, I either fly up to see you, which is expensive and time consuming, and neither of us have the time or energy to do that,
Right.
or we go, you know what, Simon, let's have that chat, but we'll do it at Infocom when we both know we're going.
Right.
That's June. Are we
Yes.
going to wait 5 months to have this meeting?
I'd
And that's
hate to do that with you, Simon. I'd rather it be sooner rather than later.
Well, there you go. And that's the point of power of video is that it allows people to do things today that they would typically put off.
Right.
And I think people have always gone on about, oh, well, it saves money on airline ticket. Well, I did 177,000 air miles with Southwest last year.
Mm.
Believe me, video conferencing doesn't make you travel less,
Right.
but it does allow you to do conversations and meetings and relationship building immediately.
Mm.
And that's the thing that the consultant should concentrate on and not worry about whether it's SIP or H323 or what color wood paneling we should put up. It's there, but it's a subset of what matters now.
And I think what you talk about, the immediacy, especially with video communication, I think the story of saving and travel and all is just not the story anymore, Simon.
I don't think
Everybody's
it ever
pitched that.
was, frankly, Corey, but a lot of people have for a
Yes,
long time. Almost everything I've written the last 2 years has been a stop with the time travel thing.
right, right.
Um, I
Because you know what? There's still a purpose for it to be in front of people. This, see, to me, I think this works. And even in a meeting in DC, let's say, let's start with a video conference. And if we do have to get together, let's get together face to face. But then again, if you don't have to, that's where this really makes sense. But then saying, just to the point of, well, this is going to save travel and all, I don't think that's the lead that you take.
Well, let's be completely frank with each other. Neither of us was going to get on a plane for this meeting.
Right,
Neither of us have the time. It just not. This is an important meeting, but it's not so vital that
right.
I'm like stop everything. I'm going to get on a plane and fly to DC, and you're not coming down to Texas.
Oh yeah. Well, I lived in Austin for a year, so I know that you're based in Austin, so I do know Austin. But you're right, I'm not flying
But you're
down.
not flying there to see me for 45 minutes.
Oh, maybe
And
maybe I'll come down, but it'll be more than 45 minutes. Let's put it that
there you
way.
go. But the opportunity to do this immediately is the real power, and that's what I'm
Yes.
excited about.
Yes, and the immediacy exactly. Well, Simon, this has been absolutely terrific again, and I think this is very rewarding for those who are watching. And for everybody who is, again, get to know Simon Dudley through his YouTube videos. There was a very, very good one where Simon was interviewing Craig Malloy. I did watch that. And of course, he'll be at Infocom and, Enterprise Connect. So if you're going to either, look up Simon Dudley. So again, Simon, thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Corey. Just to let anyone know, if they want to cover me on Twitter or follow me on Twitter, I'm at Simon Dudley.
Hmm.
I go to most of the big shows. I always love feedback, so send me some. I'd be delighted to interact with anyone who wants to pick holes in our arguments today.
Well, hey, listen, I hope not, but you never know. So, again, thank you very much, Simon. I really appreciate it.